Hello and welcome back. I'm Britt Hume, and this is On the Record. There is a new Project Veritas video out tonight which seems directly to connect Hillary Clinton to Donald Duck costumes popping up at Trump events. At this hour, Trump himself is about to speak in Florida. You can see someone else is currently at the podium. We will monitor the rally and bring you any news that comes out of it. At the moment, the national polling average shows Hillary Clinton with a 5.5-point lead in a two-way race and a 5-point lead in a four-way. The betting odds continue to show her a heavy favorite by more than 5-1. Regardless of those numbers, Donald Trump says he is winning the race and blames the media for suggesting otherwise. Listen to this.
Watch the polls, because this is part of the crooked system. It's part of the rigged system. They are phony polls put out by phony media. They try and suppress the vote. This way people don't go out and vote. But we're winning this race.
Trump supporters cite a handful of polls they say correctly contradict all the others showing their man trailing. In particular, they like the Rasmussen poll, which currently shows Mr. Trump with a 2-point lead in a four-way race. It is the only poll in the Real Clear Politics average which has the Republican leading. So why doesn't this poll get more attention? For answers, we turn once again to Scott Jennings, who did political analysis for the Bush 43 White House. So, Scott, I can remember back in not too many years ago, we thought the Rasmussen polls were just fine. However, here at Fox News, we're encouraged to not pay much attention to them. Why would that be?
Well, the Rasmussen polls methodology has been called into question. It is an automated polling survey, so it's not a live caller like some of the higher quality media polls that are out there. And therefore, they don't have the capacity to capture people with cell phones, and it's a little ambiguous how they try to get around that. So on top of that, in 2012, the Rasmussen poll wasn't terribly accurate. There are 3 polls showing the Trump campaign in a competitive place. That's one of them, but it's not one that I would pay attention to.
Well, let me ask you, you mentioned that they don't, by law, robocall polls or robocalls cannot call cell phones. So they have what they say is a method, partly online, I'm not sure I understand it, whereby they purport to capture some of the cell phone users. Do you know how that works?
They have an online process that isn't exactly explained on their website. However, there is a high-quality survey, the Investors Business Daily poll, that does show Donald Trump in a competitive place. So if I were the Trump campaign or a Trump supporter and I wanted to hang my hat on something, I would disregard Rasmussen, but I would look at Investors Business Daily. It's a live caller survey. They capture cell phones with live callers, and it shows Trump in a competitive place.
Yes, in fact, right now, it basically shows the race a tie, both in a two-way and a four-way race. So, and you say it's on the up and up. Is there anything about it that should not encourage Trump voters to look at that and say, hey, we're right there, we're in the hunt?
Well, it is a high-quality survey in terms of methodology, and it did have a high degree of accuracy in 2012. There have been 3 surveys since the third debate that all have good methodology and live calling and capturing cell phones. Investors Business Daily, which has it basically tied. CNN Tonight has a 5-point advantage for Hillary Clinton, and ABC News Washington Post has a 12-point advantage for Clinton. So it's a tale of 3 different polls: tied, small lead, large lead. The difference in the surveys isn't really Trump. Everybody agrees he's below 45. The difference is, where's Hillary? Is she closer to 40 or is she closer to 50? That's the real variance in the 3 surveys since the third debate.
Yeah, I know. It's hard for me to believe that it's a 12-point lead right now. The 5 and 6 range seems more in keeping with the polling averages, which helps explain, by the way, why we use the polling averages every night, because we're trying to avoid being taken off track by outlier polls that don't comport with what most of the polls are showing. Now, in terms of what you're finding inside these polls, which show the candidates' proportion of the vote in various ways, what is it about these polls that you think would be more encouraging to Hillary voters and perhaps less so to Donald Trump, suggesting that the 5 or 6 point margin might be correct?
Well, inside the surveys since the debate, we see some degradation in GOP enthusiasm. We see Hillary Clinton in 2 of the 3 cases getting more party consolidation than Trump is getting. He's still hovering around 80% in 2 of those 3 surveys. However, in the CNN poll tonight, he was up at 90%, and that put him at 45% overall. So you can see consolidating your base puts you in a much more competitive position, not necessarily ahead, but it does get you out of that low 40s vortex that he seems to be trapped inside of. And we also see Trump in some of the polling still competitive on the issue of the economy. For Hillary Clinton, though, it's temperament. You asked the question about temperament and judgment, and that's where she's beating Donald Trump. It's very close on the issues, but temperament seems to be where she's holding on to some kind of a lead, large or small, we don't know which.
You know, I wonder if we look at that CNN ORC poll, and we have it up on the screen, and it shows that both candidates are about the same place with members of their own party. Trump, as you noted, had been trailing in that category down, as you said, about 80%, which was not, you know, when you think Romney got 93% of Republicans, obviously he had some ground to make up. Perhaps this poll is the leading edge of a change, which would bode well for him.
That's right. To have any chance to win, he needs to get up over 90% of Republicans. And he has been doing fairly well with independents in some surveys. And so you see, getting to 90% puts him there in the mid-40s. He needs to go even higher if he is to win this race. And Hillary Clinton, of course, needs to hang on to her Democratic base.
All right. Scott, as always, thanks very much. The Clinton campaign has tried to paint Bob Creamer, one of the Democratic operatives in the video, as a peripheral figure. But there is, as James has noted, evidence suggesting he was certainly more than that. Our nightly political panel is here. Guy Benson, political editor at townhall.com, and Susan Ferricchio, chief congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. Guy, your thoughts about this and what it tells us. I mean, it's a little hard to get too worked up about something that deeply involves Donald Duck,
yeah.
but I guess, you know, this is where this bizarre campaign has taken us.
It's
now.
2016, Britt, so of course we're discussing Donald Duck. This is very important. The underlying issue is, was there a crime here? Was this a violation of federal law, which there may have been? I think we need more info on that, but it certainly doesn't look good on the tape.
Which law would that be?
Well, the coordination, how you have outside groups being not allowed under federal election law to coordinate with the campaign, and if this is Hillary Clinton, clearly the campaign, the embodiment of the campaign, directing outside groups to do things, that's not permitted. So that's the legal issue at stake. And then there is the secondary issue of this guy Creamer, who's now gone, and you make the correct point, he and Fovel are both gone. So if this was totally selectively edited, they seem to fall on their swords or get fired awfully quickly. He was at the White House, as James just reported, roughly once per week over the course of the Obama administration.
Right.
Yeah, that is really interesting, even for the husband of a congresswoman.
We should mention what the White House says about that is that he was, first of all, the husband of Democratic Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky from Chicago, and that he would therefore be cleared to come to the White House as the spouse of a sitting member of Congress, and that the events or the occasions of his visits were large events in which a lot of people were present. That seems a little difficult to imagine that there could be so many large events to add up to 342 visits, and we know there were some 40-some at which the president was present. So the question arises, you know, is it a plausible explanation that he was there and he really wasn't involved with the White House at all? What do you think, Susan?
Not for all those visits. You know, if he'd only been there 10 times or what, because remember, we go through those White House logs back when there was a question about how often the IRS commissioner was visiting. And that's a lot of visits to just be there as the spouse of a congressperson, or the Easter egg roll, or whatever else they come up with. Clearly, there was something else going on there where he was doing business in the White House.
Yeah, and if you think of the number 342, I mean, that's almost a one whole year's worth of visits to the White House. That's a lot of visits.
Let's not pretend that he's an average run-of-the-mill spouse of a member of Congress either. He is a well-known, long-established hatchet man for the Democratic Party. He is a practitioner of dirty tricks. That's what he did. He went to prison at one point for unrelated fraud. This isn't just an average guy who might be married to a Democrat from Chicago. You're at the White House 342 times for a reason, and as Susan says, it's not just the Easter egg roll.
That's where it's
and he's been fired. If that kind of says it all. Yeah. They didn't want him on the campaign anymore.
Well, and the fact that he's a convict doesn't look too great either. So
bank fraud.
Thanks to both of you. Stay with us. Clinton campaign today in New Hampshire with the darling of her party's left, Senator Elizabeth Warren. Fox News correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live in Manchester, New Hampshire. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi, Britt. Well, Hillary Clinton is heading to her birthday party in Manhattan. It is really another fundraiser. Those who are attending will be paying $10,000 to do so. Stevie Wonder will be performing. The press, of course, is not invited. We are here in Manchester, New Hampshire, where earlier today, Hillary Clinton was campaigning with Elizabeth Warren. Here's what they said.
Well, I got news for you, Donald Trump. women have had it with guys like you. And nasty women have really had it with guys like you. Nasty women are tough. Nasty women are smart. And nasty women vote.
Their goal to get women to vote in large numbers and to get Governor Maggie Hassan elected to the Senate. She is in a tight race with Republican Senator Kelly Ayotte. Clinton repeated that she wants to overturn Citizens United, even though her campaign has been the largest beneficiary of super PACs.
We're going to make big banks pay for the risks they pose to our economy, because Elizabeth is absolutely right. No bank is too big to fail, and no one should be above the law. So we're going to enforce that.
Clinton is sounding a lot like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, who has long been a thorn in the side of Wall Street, even though Clinton's Wall Street speeches showed she is anything but. Meanwhile, her opponent was back on Twitter, quote, "The attack on Mosul is turning out to be a total disaster. We gave them months of notice. U.S. is looking so dumb. Vote Trump and win again."
And just last night, he tweeted that the new effort underway to push the terrorists out of the key city of Mosul is already, and I quote, "a total disaster," and that our country is, quote, "looking so dumb." Imagine. You know, this is a guy who says he knows more about ISIS than the generals. I don't think so.
Vice President Biden was in Toledo, Ohio today. He and Tim Kaine down in Florida were focusing on the down ballot candidates, how to help them. But even if the Democrats win the Senate, Britt, that win may be short-lived, because in 2018 there are 25 Democratic seats, or independents leaning Democratic, who are up for re-election compared to 8 Republicans. So that is why there is such a push right now to try and win as many seats as possible to flip the Senate to the Democratic category. Back to you, Brent.
Yeah, that's right, Jennifer. That would create a situation much like President Obama had, where he had the Senate and the House for 2 years, then lost the House and eventually the Senate as well. So that would, that 2-year window, if she wins, could be a critical time. Thanks, Jennifer, very much. Right now, let's speed read other news from the world of politics. A former rising star of the Democratic Party in Pennsylvania is headed for jail. Kathleen Kane, the former Democratic Attorney General of the state, was sentenced to 10 to 23 months in prison. Kane was found guilty of leaking grand jury documents and lying under oath to plant a negative story about her political opponent. A former State Department IT worker has invoked his Fifth Amendment rights and refused to answer questions about Hillary Clinton's private email server more than 90 times today. After a federal judge ordered John Bentel to answer questions, he pleaded the Fifth repeatedly in a sworn deposition. Bentel would not comment on whether the Clintons paid his legal fees or offered him any other money. In June 2015, Bentel told the House Select Committee on Benghazi that he had no knowledge about Clinton's server. There's a new Democratic mega donor tonight. Facebook co-founder Justin Moskovitz just wrote 2 massive checks to the Democratic Party in the past 6 weeks. Moskovitz donated $20 million and then another $15 million. The 32-year-old, who according to Bloomberg is worth more than $12 billion, is a longtime philanthropist but a political newcomer. And during election season, full of attack ads, there's a new ad that's actually lighthearted. It features the wife of a local Texas politician begging voters to re-elect her husband, Gerald. Gerald Doherty, a Texas Republican, is currently running for re-election as Travis County Commissioner. That viral campaign video has racked up nearly 2 million views on Facebook, and Lord knows how many on Twitter as well. And new emails released by WikiLeaks show the Clinton campaign may not have always had President Obama's back. That's next. Also, is the media unfairly criticizing candidates' supporters? We'll discuss that with Joe Concha coming up. WikiLeaks just released its 17th batch of emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry has been searching through the emails and has the story.
As Hillary Clinton continues to tout what she frames as President Obama's success in dealing with the financial crisis,
I don't think he gets the credit he deserves for saving our economy.
new emails released by WikiLeaks show top Clinton aides openly contradicting that narrative. Roger Altman, who served as Deputy Secretary of the Treasury under President Bill Clinton, warned that, quote, American economic dynamism is weakening, which in turn signals lower productivity and economic mobility. In an email to top Clinton aide Jake Sullivan in the summer of 2015, Altman zeroed in on a massive decline in small business startups and added, by some measures, this sector is still in recession. It follows an earlier leaked email from interim DNC chair Donna Brazile, lamenting the state of the economy. She told Clinton campaign chair John Podesta, quote, I think people are more in despair about how things are. Yes, new jobs, but they are low-wage jobs. And when it comes to cracking down on Wall Street,
I am so looking forward to working with her to rewrite the rules of our economy.
Clinton advisor Mandy Grunwald openly admitted that in the candidate's paid speeches to Wall Street banks, her most memorable lines were totally accommodationist. The former Secretary of State had also said it's important to have a public position and a private one. And on that point, another email is raising doubts about the sincerity of this public pronouncement.
If you believe that your working mother, wife, sister, or daughter deserves equal pay, join us.
It turns out an official at the Clinton Foundation sent an email raising concerns that they were paying men, on average, over $4,000 more per year than women. Top Clinton aides are still refusing to confirm or deny the authenticity of the missives.
This is a distraction put in place by the Russian government at the suggestion and encouragement of Donald Trump.
And another gem from liberal activist Neera Tanden 13 months ago, writing to John Podesta that Clinton should throw a party for her staff at her campaign headquarters in Brooklyn and then leak out photos of Hillary drinking beer and, quote, letting loose to some music that could then go viral. A specific plan to try and make her look cooler and more authentic. Sadly, it appears they never went through with that because we never got those photos of her drinking beer or dancing, Britt.
Let me say to you, Ed, that if you uncover video of Hillary Clinton dancing and, rugging it with fans,
can I lead the show?
It'll get on this show.
I appreciate that.
All right, Ed, thanks very much. Donald Trump has threatened to sue the women that have accused him of sexual misconduct. Could he win such lawsuits? That's next.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. The events never happened. Never. All of these liars will be sued after the election is over.
That was Donald Trump this weekend. He's no stranger to lawsuits, but what would it take for him to win a case against the women who have accused him of sexual misconduct? For answers, we turn to my old friend, Professor Jonathan Turley of George Washington University Law School. Jonathan.
Hi, Britt.
Nice to see you. Okay, so I assume he's talking here about filing a slander suit, or if any of this was in writing, perhaps a libel suit. What would have to happen for him to get anywhere with such a suit?
Well, it's a long road to hoe, and the odds are heavily against him. He is, in fact, a celebrity, in fact, the ultimate celebrity at a show by that name, and he is subject to a higher standard under a case called New York Times versus Sullivan. And what the Supreme Court said is that public figures, like public officials, have to be prepared to accept more in terms of criticism, allegations in the media, that they play such a central role in society that people talk about them. That's the life you choose. And so in order to prove that he was the victim of defamation, he'd have to prove what's called actual malice. He'd have to show that these people knew that this was a lie, or show reckless disregard as to whether it was truthful or not.
So when the court spoke of actual malice, it wasn't referring to ill will.
Right.
It was referring to, as you say, either knowing falsehood or a reckless disregard of the truth.
That's right.
Right. So and so how would a case like that proceed? He files. Defense answers, presumably they then go to discovery, right, in which each side's lawyers get to question the other party. How would that go for him in your judgment?
Well, discovery would be pretty brutal. I mean, so would the trial. First of all, they're allowed to ask anything relevant. Can you imagine how broad the relevance would be in a case involving sexual harassment and unwanted touchings? It's not just this recent video of Mr. Trump. It would be a whole array of witnesses and people that he would be asked about.
So I assume that this would bring the facts of his previous divorces into play?
Absolutely. And then
anything that he was perhaps doing while while awaiting divorce or while still married to one woman, whether other women are involved in all of that?
That's right, and the trial would be a bloody nightmare.
Now, one of the classic defenses against libel is, apart from the high standard of proof that you've articulated, is you have to prove that the person was damaged, right?
Right.
So I assume that you then attack the suing party's reputation.
That's right. In fact, there's a small category of people who are libel-proof. The reputation is so bad they can't be hurt. Now, he wouldn't fall into that category, but the jury is not likely to take some of these stories well, particularly if they see that video in which he's talking about precisely the type of conduct these women have alleged. That doesn't mean he's guilty of it. And also, if they're lying, he has every right to sue. But Donald Trump has a habit of suing everyone and letting God sort them out. And that's not a real smart strategy when it comes to libel.
Now, in this case, first, he would have to establish that these allegations were false. That's the first thing he'd have to do.
Because truth is the defense.
Truth is always a defense, no matter whether you're a public figure or not.
That's
correct?
Right.
All right. So in order to establish that, presumably the women would come in and they would testify under oath that what they claimed happened back during the campaign, in fact, happened. Right. He would then deny that, given his opportunity. If it's a he said, she said situation, I mean, I know that there's a butler at Mar-a-Lago who might be prepared to testify that he didn't see that conduct that was alleged. But in most of these instances, I assume it's a kind of a one-on-one deal. He said, she said. How does that usually work out?
He would have to throw a perfect game at this trial. He has to knock out every one of these women. He has such overwhelming evidence that the jury hears all of these accounts, sees potentially that video of his talking about what celebrities can do, and discounts them all. Because this is one of those types of cases where if they believe a couple, they're likely to believe them all. Right. And so the odds are heavily against him. And part of the problem here is that, presidents have to learn that they can't go into court, that they lose a lot by just going into court. President Obama's learned that. He's lost a lot of presidential privilege arguments that have hurt his office. Right. So presidents have to show a great deal of restraint. And in this case, you look at this, and if I was his lawyer, I would say, look, the first question is, are they lying? And if they are, you have every right to sue. But then you have to ask, is the powder worth the prize here? Are you willing to go into litigation and experience this process with probably low likelihoods of prevailing?
Now, he has said, Jonathan, that he wants to change the libel laws to make it easier for people like himself and others who are aggrieved by what they say are false media accounts to sue. But that's not something Congress could do, is it?
No. New York Times versus Sullivan is based on the First Amendment. Unless he's going to change the First Amendment, and God help us if that's what his interest is doing, he can't change this standard. The New York Times versus Sullivan was designed to protect free speech. It was to allow people to feel free that they could say things about their leaders without being sued.
I've been a defendant in a libel suit. Yeah. I mean, people, and sometimes what people would say to me, well, that doesn't sound fair that you could print and publish a falsehood, and that high standard of proof that you were reckless or willful about it, that seems like it's too high. But I think what it comes down to is that journalists and perhaps others speaking in the public square should not be subject to a ruinous lawsuit because of an honest mistake. And basically, you kind of have to prove that it was a dishonest mistake.
That's right. I mean, the test is not whether it was false. The question is whether this was false and they had reckless disregard as whether it was false or knew it was false. That's rarely the case. And so Donald Trump could be right. These women could be falsely accusing him. But the Constitution demands a certain degree of breathing space for people to talk about their leaders. And that comes at a cost. There's a lot of bad speech out there. There's a lot of terrible things said on the internet, particularly by people who use anonymity. But the value is that we have a robust free speech in this country. And that's what it's designed to protect.
Yeah, it isn't always pretty, is it?
It's not pretty, but it's helped us so far pretty darn well.
Jonathan, what a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brett.
Good to see you. We've talked many times on this program about the media's struggle to cover the candidates fairly. But what about their supporters? Is the media, are the media, fairly characterizing them? Just look at today's USA Today, which calls Trump supporters, quote, angry white men. It then goes on to characterize Clinton supporters as, quote, frustrated minorities who feel under assault. Joe Concha covers the media for The Hill. He joins us from New York. Joe, good evening.
Hey,
Give me your thoughts about this, the way these two candidates' supporters are being treated. Actually, I haven't seen a lot of reporting about Clinton supporters. There's been quite a lot about Trump's. Your thoughts?
Well, your segment here couldn't be any better timed. I have with me the week that came out today. This is the cover. It says, after the election, and basically goes through Trump supporters bringing the apocalypse to America. You know, how will Trump's followers react? And you have your pitchforks, which are very 17th century, obviously. You have your torches, a couple of AK-47s. The point, and in a related story, all of those people in that picture are Caucasian. So the way Trump supporters are being covered is basically that the house is going to get burned down if Hillary Clinton wins. But there is some data that does support that argument, Britt. Reuters did a poll last week, says that 7 in 10 Republicans will think that the vote was either, the exact wording is illegal voting, or that it was rigged in some capacity if Hillary Clinton wins, and half of Republicans will not accept a Hillary Clinton presidency. So while you can obviously look at the hyperbole and the reaction, pitchforks and torches and AK-47s, doubt that's going to happen, but this will be a divided, polarized country. Not that it already isn't already, but even more so after this election, unfortunately.
Well, it does raise a question in my mind about how people who have been so confident about Trump and have believed so deeply in him, and there's one thing that I'm absolutely convinced of, is the utter sincerity of Trump supporters who really have set a lot of store by him and believe what he says. And of course, his image has been that of a winner, and his campaign has been about America winning again and about everyone in America, therefore, being winners again. If he loses, they may have trouble accepting it, but he will then be a loser perhaps in their eyes, maybe not. But what effect do you think that will have on his standing with his supporters?
Well, or they'll think that it was taken from him based on the data that I just shared, that, well, he really didn't lose, that this is a rigged system in some capacity. So perhaps, Britt, that's the way that's going to go. But look, you know, the way that Trump supporters have been covered is a bit unfair when you look at the James O'Keefe Project Veritas tapes that came out. Now, you could question the source as far as O'Keefe is concerned, given past problems that he's had, but the video is pretty clear. It doesn't look like the editing has been manipulated in any way. And the bottom line is, it appears that people were hired to go to Trump rallies, to start fights, to give the impression that Trump supporters are violent people that are out to cause violence, when actually it appears that it may have been the other way around. So the narrative about Trump supporters being these horrible people that are looking to, again, burn the house down, according to at least those tapes, doesn't appear to be very accurate.
Yeah, and I wonder whether or not there isn't a certain kind of class condescension going on here, where the people who are for Trump are looked down upon as, you know, angry, white, ignorant people motivated by, you know, racism and worse. And if that doesn't reflect a failure on the part of people who consider themselves to be educated and smarter, a failure on their part to understand.
I think if you look at Saturday Night Live this weekend, Tom Hanks, a great actor, obviously beloved by many Americans, went on and was portraying a Trump supporter on a version of Jeopardy that they do, and just made Trump supporters all look like completely out of touch, racist, xenophobic, just dumb idiots. And that's basically the impression that I think one side of the country has of Trump supporters, that they're just not very educated, that they're not in touch with things. And obviously that's a very unfair thing to say about, as you know, Hillary Clinton said, deplorable people. That amounts to, if she said it was half, 30 million Americans all being portrayed as schmucks. And that's simply something that I would say is very unfair.
Yeah, and in the end, I think it's bad politics, too, Joe. Thanks very much.
All right, Brett, good to see you.
You too. And safe spaces on one California campus are apparently not nice enough. Some students want new and improved safe spaces. Our Campus Craziness segment is coming up next. Time now to look at some of the craziness at our nation's colleges and universities. A student group at Stanford University conspired to disrupt the inauguration of the school's new president because he's a, quote, cisgender white male. Cisgender means he identifies with the sex he was born with. A student newspaper, the Stanford Review, cited emails containing plans to disrupt the inauguration with student protesters. The email noted that its contents, quote, cannot be made public. Well, now it has. The group behind the protest is named Who's Teaching Us? It recently released a list of 25 demands. One of those demands is for the university president to, quote, break both the legacy of white leadership and cisgender male leadership. Despite their plans, the inauguration went smoothly. Left-wing protesters at the University of California at Berkeley took to the streets to demand a better location for their on-campus safe space. Video posted online shows that the protesters blocked a bridge on campus and told white students to find another way to cross. The video also shows that protesters harassed campus police officers, blocked traffic near campus, and disrupted students who were studying. Student groups that led the protests actually picked the location of the safe space they are now dissatisfied with. Vandals at Columbia University in New York tore down flyers that advertised an on-campus speech against trigger warnings. According to the College Fix, which first reported the story, nearly 50 flyers had been torn down within 24 hours. The event is titled Victims, Victims Everywhere, Trigger Warnings, Liberty, and the Academy. The speaker, Christina Hoff Sommers, is a noted critic of modern feminism. Event organizers told the College Fix they plan to post more flyers to replace the ones that were torn down. Columbia University did not respond to Fox News for comment. The Department of Campus Life at Emory University in Atlanta has announced a series of social events for students of color only. According to emails obtained by the website Campus Reform, which covers college news, Emory's interim director for multicultural programs described the event as, quote, an opportunity for people of color to connect and build relationships. He also defended the concept of segregated events as, quote, beneficial for our employees and institutions in many fields, including higher education. A spokesperson for Emory University insisted to Fox News that the event was open to all students, but also mentioned a Facebook post that said the event was, quote, an opportunity for students, staff, and alumni of color to connect and build a community. Time now for another round of viewer feedback. One continuing point of contention in my Twitter feed is Donald Trump. Nancy Killian tweeted, dude, we suffered through your tacky wardrobe, probably leftover tablecloths from the 60s, but can you be a little less hateful to Trump? But Eileen Searcy said, quote, way to go, Britt. I bet you're a silent Trump supporter. Looking up 52, though, wasn't buying that, tweeting, go away, traitor. Go Trump. Make America great again and shut guys like Brit Hume up. Someone called View from Wise wasn't buying that. Brit Hume makes so many moronic pro-Trump spewings that the University of Virginia has disowned him. And CJNVA tweeted, when Trump talks about the corrupt media, he's talking about Brit Hume. Demetrius Minor asked, though, wait, is Brit Hume a full-fledged Trump supporter now? And finally, Bobby J's World tweeted, I cannot figure out why you get mean tweets. You're not that bad for a boring old dude. Please keep the feedback coming, everybody. We do like hearing from you. Use Brit Hume on Twitter or email on the record at foxnews.com. That's about it for us tonight, but stay tuned for tonight's O'Reilly Factor, in which Bill will analyze the Trump Gettysburg speech and how the media covered it, plus the outrage over the Pentagon's demanding bonuses back from soldiers who risk life and limb for their country. In the meantime, we leave you, as always, with our political quote of the day, which comes from the conservative writer and editor William F. Buckley, who said, quote, liberals claim to want to give a hearing to other views, but then are shocked.
In 2012, the Rasmussen poll wasn't terribly accurate. There are 3 polls showing the Trump campaign in a competitive place. That's one of them, but it's not one that I would pay attention to.
Well, let me ask you, you mentioned that they don't, by law, robocall polls or robocalls cannot call cell phones. So they have what they say is a method, partly online, I'm not sure I understand it, whereby they purport to capture some of the cell phone users. Do you know how that works?
They have an online process that isn't exactly explained on their website. However, there is a high-quality survey, the Investors Business Daily poll, that does show Donald Trump in a competitive place. So if I were the Trump campaign or a Trump supporter and I wanted to hang my hat on something, I would disregard Rasmussen, but I would look at Investors Business Daily. It's a live call.
Cite a handful of polls they say correctly contradict all the others showing their man trailing. In particular, they like the Rasmussen poll, which currently shows Mr. Trump with a 2-point lead in a 4-way race. It is the only poll in the Real Clear Politics average which has the Republican leading. So why doesn't this poll get more attention? For answers, we turn once again to Scott Jennings, who did political analysis for the Bush 43 White House. So, Scott, I can remember back in not too many years ago, we thought the Rasmussen polls were just fine. However, here at Fox News, we're encouraged to not pay much attention to them. Why would that be?
Well, the Rasmussen poll's methodology has been called into question. It is an automated polling survey, so it's not a live caller like some of the higher quality media polls that are out there. And therefore, they don't have the capacity to capture people with cell phones, and it's a little ambiguous how they try to get around that. So on top of that,
Hello and welcome back. I'm Britt Hume, and this is On the Record. There is a new Project Veritas video out tonight which seems directly to connect Hillary Clinton to Donald Duck costumes popping up at Trump events. At this hour, Trump himself is about to speak in Florida. You can see someone else is currently at the podium. We will monitor the rally and bring you any news that comes out of it. At the moment, the national polling average shows Hillary Clinton with a 5.5-point lead in a two-way race and a 5-point lead in a four-way. The betting odds continue to show her a heavy favorite by more than 5-1. Regardless of those numbers, Donald Trump says he is winning the race and blames the media for suggesting otherwise. Listen to this.
Watch the polls, because this is part of the crooked system. It's part of the rigged system. They are phony polls put out by phony media. They try and suppress the vote. This way people don't go out and vote. But we're winning this race.
Trump supporters.
Caller survey, they capture cell phones with live callers, and it shows Trump in a competitive place.
Yes, in fact, right now, it basically shows the race a tie, both in a two-way and a four-way race. So, and you say it's on the up and up. Is there anything about it that should not encourage Trump voters to look at that and say, hey, we're right there, we're in the hunt?
Well, it is a high-quality survey in terms of methodology, and it did have a high degree of accuracy in 2012. There have been 3 surveys since the third debate that all have good methodology and live calling and capturing cell phones. Investors Business Daily, which has it basically tied. CNN Tonight has a 5-point advantage for Hillary Clinton, and ABC News Washington Post has a 12-point advantage for Clinton. So it's a tale of 3 different polls: tied, small lead, large lead. The difference in the surveys isn't really Trump. Everybody agrees he's below 45. The difference is, where's Hillary? Is she closer to 40 or is she closer to 50? That's the real variance in the 3 surveys since the third debate.
Yeah, I know. It's hard for me to believe that it's a 12-point lead right now. The 5 and 6 range seems more in keeping with the polling averages, which helps explain, by the way, why we use the polling averages every night, because we're trying to avoid being taken off track by outlier polls that don't comport with what most of the polls are showing. Now, in terms of what you're finding inside these polls, which show the candidates' proportion of the vote in various ways, what is it about these polls that you think would be more encouraging to Hillary voters and perhaps less so to Donald Trump, suggesting that the 5 or 6 point margin might be correct?
Well, inside the survey,